Welcome to the Let's Talk About Talking podcast with your host, Adrienne Fuller, language and communications expert for kids of all ages. On this podcast, we talk about speech, language, and all things happening with your child, giving you specific tactical information you can use to help your kids talk, listen, and thrive in their academic journey.
Hello guys, Happy New Year. This is Miss A, the SLP. I am now live. Happy 2022, and I'm going to be honest, it has not been without any excitement, guys, but what is a year without it? I am honored and blessed to be before you today. Happy New Year to you. And this is January 5th. 2022 nap time, chat time. This is a time that we talk to parents about their child's development and while their child is sleeping. And I do want to let you know that everyone's calling and texting me today. Oh my gosh, like right now. I love it. But I do want to let you know that this will probably be our last Wednesday. I wanted to keep my word before I left on the break. I said, I'll see you next Wednesday, the 5th. And so I wanted to do it, but I think Tuesday's going to be better. So I'm going to do it like a little earlier during lunchtime, because when I was a therapist in the preschools, all my kids had lunch and were down for nap by noon. So get your child down by noon. If not, make sure, just like one of our therapists does, this is their quiet time. So you don't have to go to sleep, but you do need time as a parent just to recharge. And so today I wanted to kick off the year with a special guest. And today we are going to talk about autism, something no one likes to talk about, but the numbers are growing in our community. In all communities. And I feel like parents are still a little leery to get information and get their child tested. And so today I am bringing on a person. Her name is Ashley Seiler, and she is an amazing speech therapist. And actually, I think I'm going to have her back because I want her to talk about the McKay scholarship too, because I think a lot of parents don't know about that either. But that's for another time, guys. But she's gone through the experience of having a child diagnosed, and I wanted her to talk to you about that today. So we're going to bring her on. Let's see, hold on. I do want to remind you while she's getting on, 30 days to get your toddler talking. It's still out there, folks. It's a 30-day step-by-step program for parents and caregivers of toddlers not yet talking or talking just a little bit. So if your child's in speech therapy, this is a good carryover program. It is not to take the place of speech therapy, but it will help. Especially because speech therapists are not magicians, are they, Ashley?
Correct. Although we dabble.
We dabble a little bit, but we are not magicians. We see your child 30 minutes to 60 minutes, sometimes 180 minutes, but I don't see very many kids that long these days. And so really what you're doing at home is the most important thing. But we never want to be long before you. I'm not a big fan of long lives. So Ashley, we've known each other for years, and I have come to know you a little bit better, and have called, now I think I call you friend now. I love
this. Yes. We're there.
Yes. And I find that our parents, especially like when I evaluate a child that's very young, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years old, I always want to, and I have my own suspicion, my own red flags, but sometimes I feel like when I share them with parents, they're very like almost like they don't know what to do with the information. It's a lot to process. And I think sometimes as even professionals, we just throw that word autism at parents and they don't know what to do. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what you did and how you wish or if there's anything that you wish you'd done differently?
Yes. My experience is a little unique since I was in the profession prior to the diagnosis my son received. So I was on the actual end of trying to push forward for services, and I was getting blocked
Mm-hmm.
by other professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been through it. What I will say for everyone is it is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's an individual journey, but there is support out there, and to always follow your instincts, your mommy gut. I tell parents that 100% of the time. If you feel something needs to be looked at, then you should pursue that. Even if a physician, someone you think knows more than you about your child, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is in disagreement. And that's what I would say happened. So with our nephew, so Thomas is 22 now. He's high functioning autism, which was called Asperger's. He's our nephew, and we got him. He came to live with us at first at the age of 3, and I was always involved in his life, you know, when he was born, and I had concerns. However, there was a traumatic situation as well with the, you know, the abrupt moving, and he ended up, you know, living with us while we still had contact with his birth parents. But there was some situations. So our journey started off with concern.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't actually get a diagnosis till the age of 8 because he had high functioning, very high functioning, and smart, wasn't struggling academically.
Mm-hmm.
And so the public school system really didn't know what to do with him. I found that I was educating them more about the types of services he needed, as well as I even wrote his behavior plan for the school. Because since he's higher functioning and didn't fit into their little box,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was a learning experience for them as well.
And Ashley, I'm sorry, let me just interrupt you on that, because I've been in those school meetings and you raised a really good point. Like, sometimes the school won't know what to do with your child, right, and teachers are busy. They are pressed to the max. They don't oftentimes want to be in the meeting in the first place. And so as a parent, if you feel like something's wrong and there's like preschool or even school age, because I hear a lot like, okay, I'll just wait till he gets in school. Well, you're late to the game, in my opinion. Correct. But if there's no time like the present. But I always tell parents, you need to speak to your child's school staffing specialist immediately and say, I need to call a meeting. And even at that meeting, sometimes they'll say, oh, let's try these things. What do you recommend when they're in the meeting they should say?
Well, I would go, depending on the age. So birth to 3 is early steps. That's where you need to be contacting to get some services and support if you suspect that there could be any type of developmental concerns, whether it's called autism or not. If there's any concerns, birth to 3, go through early steps. And that's in any county and any state. Mm-hmm. Second would be once the child turns 3, if they don't automatically transition into the public schools, that's when you go through your preschool diagnostic evaluation center. So a lot of parents don't realize that when a child turns 3, the public school system becomes responsible to provide identification services for that child and possibly services if the student qualifies. And then if you have a student with need and they have an IEP, before they enter kindergarten, that IEP is going to follow them. And an IEP is an individual education plan that gets written when a student is eligible to receive services. Mm-hmm. So in my case, Thomas was quite, like I said, high functioning. He was hitting the developmental milestones. Mm-hmm. And what you need to remember is this is a process and a journey. And what is accepted as typical for a certain age, a year later, that changes drastically with what the growth is expected. Mm-hmm. So I was concerned in first grade. I was seeing signs. I was communicating with his teacher, lovely people, big hearts, wanted to do things. They, for a first grader, they noticed the social awkwardness, but for a first grader, they weren't overly concerned about that because that's kind of the year. You aren't expected to sit in a 20-minute circle, those types of things. And so second grade, so I had the meeting, I called the meeting and said, I'm concerned and I want to be in front of this. This is my beliefs, I want to be in front of this. And this is just the public school. I was getting services already privately. So the public school, I brought it up, we had a conversation. Everyone agreed we weren't able to do anything because academically he was appropriate at that time and it wasn't significant enough for them to warrant support. But again, I'm looking for protection for my child. So, sometimes our agendas are a little bit different.
That was good.
Yes.
Really good.
So come second grade, I get the phone call that now it's an issue. So I had documentation from before.
Stop. What did you have again? You had
documentation.
You can parents, you can document it on the phone. You can document it in on a piece of paper. But you do need to, even if you're just jotting it down, talk to the teacher. You just want to show that I have been trying to get this taken care of because once again, in the evaluation, I hear, well, I told them, but the
evaluation is honestly the last step. It's harder to get through this process. It is not parent friendly. I am a speech language pathologist.
Yes.
I am a former staffing coordinator. I did that job. I was in Orange County Public Schools the person who, coordinated that. So I know the law, and it still is hard to navigate.
It is.
So getting an advocate, if you don't know the lingo, talking to people and not taking no for an answer and knowing your rights.
Yes.
That's a big thing, because they'll talk you out of it, because let's face it, as a parent, I don't want my child to have autism,
Yes.
So if I have one person tell me that, according to their opinion, then I like that information, but that may not be the reality of what I'm really doing. And I think that can be a big disservice, because the earlier we get intervention, the more progression a student will make.
Yes.
So
love that.
So my child, into first grade, second grade, I put him on an IEP. He didn't have an autism diagnosis at that time. So I put him in other health impaired. I had insisted he got tested, which was a psychoeducational assessment that can be done by a school psychologist. It can also be done privately. I did both, because the public school is to be eligible for services in the public school, which is entirely different than private services that go through insurance and have different eligibility criteria. So I suggest to parents often to be looking at both avenues, because the types of services, the focus is different. Educational environment is based in the state of Florida, and you have to meet criteria, and you have to have a moderate to severe disability to even be eligible. So if you're mild and just need some support, really the public school waits until you get more moderate to severe before they step in. And so, and that's one thing I was going through. So my Thomas tested gifted, and then his writing scored in the average range. So his mathematics was in the gifted range, his reading and comprehension was the gifted range, but his writing skills for him, since he was gifted, his writing was average. So that was a deficit for him, and that's what qualified him. So it was a non-traditional way to qualify, because technically he's still working at average, but for him, he should be working above average. What's his block? And so I got him an IEP under the other health impaired program. And it sat there. I didn't need it. That IEP really didn't get activated until middle school, because first kindergarten through fifth grade, I had a very, it's small, it's structured, it's just more intimate. And once you take that leap from fifth to sixth grade, it is an entirely different world for every child.
Every child.
Yeah. The expectation of what they're expected to do independently drastically changes. And so kids who have attention deficit, autism, any type of neurological impairment where that executive functioning system isn't as developed as a typical child, even typical children struggle,
Absolutely.
He just couldn't make it. He just couldn't make it in sixth grade. I put him in a magnet school, because of course the public school is the free option. Let's face it, I had to try the free option,
Absolutely. And for many of our listeners, it's okay if public school is the option. Now, I tend to be in the school of thought that says public school can be what your child needs. You still have to be that squeaky wheel, though. You can never assume that your school is providing your child with everything they need. You just can't do that.
Yeah, the more active you are and the more involved you are, the more attention you get. Let's just face it. And I don't. It's not a negative. You're just an advocate for your child, and if you're not going to do it, who else is
going to do it? Exactly.
I am best friends with all my kids' teachers. Not best friends, but you make that effort to really develop a relationship, because it is critical. And the more they can understand about your child, the more interested they are to know about your child, and these little nuggets of wisdom they can get through conversations can really make a huge difference for a child in the classroom.
Yes.
And so I've been a big advocate for Thomas. I've educated all of his teachers, rather. And let's face it, a lot of those reg ed teachers, regular education, they don't have
They don't
the
know.
background.
They don't.
They're not meant to have the background. Maybe in school they took one class in general about kids with learning differences, period. So the expectation, even though by law they're supposed to provide certain things, you can't force someone to do something they're not capable of.
Yes.
That's what happened come his sixth grade year. Put him in a magnet program. There were only 100 sixth graders, and you had to have a level 3 or above on the FCAT at the time to even be eligible, and he scored 5s. So I knew he'd be in a, higher academic, more contained environment. Still wasn't enough. I knew at Christmas we needed to find an alternative. Like I said, I wrote his behavior plan. They didn't understand why he couldn't have lunch in the cafeteria with all those kids, at the same time. So he didn't need any academic support, but he needed environmental support to handle some of the sensory and to some of the executive functioning piece. Like, he just couldn't remember to turn things in. That could be an ADHD kid as well. And they weren't willing to work with him outside of what the expectation was for middle school, and it just wasn't realistic for him. He got what I call defeated. He was a very successful elementary school student, and by Christmas I had a depressed, defeated child that did not feel good about learning anymore.
Wow.
So I'll touch a little bit on McKay. I applied for the McKay scholarship. And so and I knew about McKay. I set this up in the sense of, I don't know that I need it right now today, but you don't know what you're going to need in the future.
Correct.
And that was exactly what happened to us. I needed that IEP now in 6th grade. And I had to enhance that IEP to really reflect his services so I could get the optimum amount of money for McKay.
Wow.
So McKay and Gardner now have melded. They have joined together. So the process is a little bit different. But if you have a medical diagnosis of autism, you are eligible for the Gardner Scholarship. If you are in a public school and you have an IEP or a 504 plan, you are now eligible for McKay. So you have 2 ways of getting support services that could get you into a private school situation. The other thing about Gardner is, right now, if your child's 2 or 3 or 7, it doesn't matter. If you are eligible for Gardner, you can use that money for services, for speech services, for behavior services, for technology. So any parent who's concerned about the funding piece, I'm a middle class. I mean, it was hard for us. Tuition was $17,000. We got 12 from the state and had to make up the difference. To get my son in a private school that specialized in students with learning disabilities. That made the difference. He graduated valedictorian.
Wow.
I mean, it took a year of recovery. I call it his recovery year, 7th grade year, where he started feeling good about himself again and learning. He made real friends for the first time, because everyone in that school was a student who had a learning challenge of some sort. Average intelligence, academically inclined, but had other needs. Yes. So that's a lot of information. I realize.
We have to have you on again, because I don't think people know about McKay or McGardner or new name, but I think there are options and support.
Correct.
I'd like to explore those the first quarter of the year, because like you were just saying, for any parent and your child is a cute toddler, and if you feel like you're not sure, or as far as the testing goes, like when we ask that parents get their kids tested, the wording I use is, let's diagnose or rule out autism or ADHD.
Yeah.
But especially if you're using insurance, make the appointment, because you can cancel an appointment.
Correct.
But you don't want to wait 6 months, and then they really need to be tested, and your back is against the wall.
And sometimes you can be on a waiting list for a year to get a quality evaluation from a professional that is quality.
Yes.
And that's one thing I wanted to say is, I just lost my train of thought, is testing. So the public schools will tell you they test for eligibility. They won't test anymore until the student has been tiered in intervention. It's the term. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. So tier 1 has to last at least 6 weeks before they look at the data. Did the student respond? If they did not, they go to tier 2. So it can be a whole school year go by the time you actually get evaluated, and they're looking for eligibility. I'm a believer in testing for information. And there's, 2 different reasons.
Those are 2 different things, guys.
2 different things, entirely different things. When a psychoeducational assessment and our neuropsycho eval is going to tell you your child's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to learning, visual learning, auditory learning, all the different ways the brain, connects to information. And so I had the public school do not only 1, but 2. and I pushed. And then I privately had the opportunity to go through the University of Central Florida, which at the time they have a developmental center. And the grad students did testing kind of, to practice. It was still quality, but I got probably $5,000 worth of testing for free. Because I knew that was available, and it was quality. It was so in depth, and it was so enlightening. What it did for me as a parent and what it would do for me as a professional is give me a guide on what to attack first. Or, it just helps you kind of prioritize the educational needs. It helps you prioritize the deficits. The more you know about what your child's strengths and weaknesses are, the better you are equipped to help. Even if you're not necessarily educated, if you know they can't remember a thing, your expectation isn't going to be to remember a 3-step direction.
Yes.
So it really, I mean, read books. I'm a professional. I went to trainings. I read books specifically, sensory processing. I did private OT evals. We did behavior therapy. We did, the biggest thing for autism is the social piece. And that gets left out a lot because it's not traditionally covered under insurance, but it's vital for students or kids to learn in that environment with other students while they're being led, because a lot of our kids are so black and white. They get the rule. I would tell Thomas this all the time. It's a blessing you live with me, and it's a curse because I'm a speech therapist, and he's getting therapy pretty much 24/7. And he was the classic example. If he knew the rules, he could tell you, I'm supposed to look in your eyes, I'm supposed to blah blah. But when it came to it, he didn't know how to do it. And so we did 2 different social skills training groups, which gave him tools. It doesn't correct the deficit because the deficit's always going to be there, but it gave him tools to be better.
Yes.
A lot of kids with autism are born with what we call low social IQ. Some people, like you and I, have a high social IQ in the sense where it comes natural to us.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't mean we don't have anxiety. It doesn't mean we don't have, times we don't want to talk to people. But it becomes more natural where you can put these rules into place and it not be atypical. So social skills training is critical. CARD, Center for Autism and Related Disorders, they have a free social skills group. Social Bridges is one that's in the community. There's 3 C's, that's in the community as well. So having that component is important. And I would say one thing to remember about therapy is in the moment, sometimes you don't see significant progress, but therapeutically, we're big believers. Ethically, if you're moving forward therapeutically, then it's worth doing. If you hit a plateau and you stop growing, then that's the reason to discontinue therapy. But know that some of these things are slower, and some of these things may not be used in that exact moment. For example, the social skills training. I wasn't real sure going through it because I didn't see these big, huge things where he wanted to talk to people, but it became so apparent how much that did for him later in life. When he interviewed, he pulled out the language and the tools, and he's actually an instructor now for Social Bridges. He runs a Dungeons and Dragons group for kids.
Very cool.
So he volunteered as a mentor, and so we had to go to our babysitter's wedding, or his babysitter's wedding. Did not want to go, was so anxious about it. This is a huge social interaction situation, we had to have several talks and plans for what that was going to look like. And once he realized through the social piece, one, this isn't about you. No one really cares. It's, about Courtney and Matt getting married.
Yes.
You don't have to have in-depth talks. This is a lot of superficial. Hi, how are you? What's the, oh, she was my babysitter. And we went through a lot of that. And then I said to him, this is an opportunity for you to come into our world, just for a short period of time. Turn it on for that hour or two, and then you can turn it off. And
correct.
He was able to do it because he had the tools. It was work for him, and it was hard, but he felt so proud when he came home from that wedding because it was success, because he had tools to apply. And that hit me just like a ton of bricks of all of that was worth it. Just for that moment, it was all worth it.
Before we get off, and first let me say, what you have to say is so amazing. Can you move the camera down so we can see your pretty face? Thank you. Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. Perfect. But the social piece is so huge. So even when kids are toddlers or getting older, what are some red flags we can look for? Like, for me, it's like if a child prefers to play alone all the time, or if they have decreased eye contact, or they're not. A lot of parents are calling that shy, that is a social trait.
Correct.
Like, that's a cue to me that there could be issues.
I'm going to take the autism label out of it. If a student has trouble or a child has trouble interacting, period, there's a need for social skill development. Even if it is a true shyness, then okay, how do we get over it? Because you still have to learn to communicate. A lot of the tools are the same, but the reason why they may have some social difficulties can be different. But the tools will be effective for any student. If you develop, it's you're teaching. We teach math, we teach reading. You can teach social skills, or the rules of social skills. They may not ever be the best at it, but the goal, and again, is improvement and growth. It's just like me. Say I wanted to play professional basketball. It wouldn't matter how long I practiced. I wasn't born with that talent, and I'm not going to be able to do it. But would I get better? Could I play on a league? Absolutely, if I, put the time and effort into it. So I think realistic expectations are important. A lot of families I hear, they want the autism gone, and that's sometimes a roadblock. Because that's not a realistic, expectation. And there's a lot of gifts that come with autism as well. There's a lot of gifts. And look, the different perspectives. I've learned so much from him with how he views things that my brain never even thought about. So you got to celebrate it, and always treat the child, not the diagnosis. I'm a very big believer in that. Doesn't matter what we call it. If that kid has social difficulties, get support in social skill development. If that student is struggling with reading comprehension, get reading, it doesn't matter what we call it, but if there's a need for a support service, go, address the need, not the label.
Oh, that's so
Sometimes
good.
we like labels because we have to have labels to get funding or to get services. So it's a double-edged sword. But as far as treatment goes, this is a child, a developing child. What are your needs right now? It doesn't matter if they're typically developing or atypically developing. We all have them. So,
Ashley, what would you say to a parent with a child on the younger side who is just not ready for, they just don't believe, they don't want to get their child tested for whatever reason? And I do believe that parents have the right to get tested, to explore or not.
Absolutely. There's a lot of different personality types, and some people are aggressive and they go all in and they do too much. And some people are in total denial and it takes too long, for services maybe. Your process is going to be your process. But again, just know that when you're ready, intervention is key. And to get appropriate intervention, you need testing. Testing is information. It gives us information. So we as professionals know, again, where to put the most effort And when you have a kiddo twice a week, 30 minutes, you don't have a lot of time. When insurance is restricting, you know, a kiddo may need a lot more support, but it's restricted for the financial piece. So we really, I feel the pressure, I know you do, to maximize every second I have with that family, that student. So I would say, why not get them tested? Go to the professional that can give you the right information. I will tell you, you go into a pediatrician, their job isn't to really dig in to find out if that, you know, they do the MChat, which is a checklist that if there's, you know, concerns, they may refer you on to a developmental pediatrician or, so the pediatricians are really, was doing some contract work recently. And I learned that this particular pediatrician's office was discouraging referrals out to speech therapists and occupational therapists because they got an incentive at the end of the year if they didn't go over amount of referrals. So push.
It's too controversial for nap time.
I didn't last long there because of, but that's our world. They weren't.
That is our world.
It's dictated by insurance, and my impression was, and I told several parents, you know, about the early steps program and insurance. The doctors, again, know your rights, you know, and insist and get with the right people. So it is read, educate yourself. And then when you're ready, move forward. I mean, sometimes I'm the first person who has mentioned, like you said, this word, which is so scary. And those people may not be happy with me for a short period of time because they have their process, but I get calls 6 months, a year later. Thank you. You know, and I don't take it personal because I'm advocating for that child and I know the process.
Yes.
I happen to be on the other end. I was one that did too much, probably. And I needed to back down. I needed to be more balanced.
Ashley, before we go, speak to that, because just as many parents that I've had that I almost have to twist their arm to get tested, I have just as many who are what I label too much parents. Correct. And I understand it all comes from out of a place of love and concern.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I think you can Google, you need to do the research, but you can almost be too much and like it's too much. Yeah.
You don't want to forget about it's a child who deserves to be a child, and you have a family, and it isn't the only need in that family dynamic. So the balance is important. My husband and I went to counseling, you know, to understand and cope as parents, and you know, we did a lot of work because unfortunately separation rates, divorce rates are very high in families who have students with learning differences. Oftentimes because you'll have two parents on opposite sides, and they aren't able to come together with what they, you know, agree as far as how support goes. So that's critical, is being balanced, looking at all the needs, not focusing on just one child's needs.
Yeah.
Sure, you could do 14 things, but is that healthy for anyone?
Right.
And, you know, and that's why we call you and I, you know, we'll say priority educationally. What's priority? You know, sure, if you only have this amount of money and you only have this amount of time, I want you to go get that test. I want you to go get a psycho ed. Sure, they could benefit from speech, but I'm not the most important thing right now.
Correct.
So it's getting with providers that can kind of help you prioritize what the need is. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that a advocate has been born today on this Nap Time Chat. Ashley, you are amazing.
And actually, I want to help families that have gone through this. It's not easy, you know, and so reaching out to people, and there are advocates, look them up. It may cost a little bit of money, but it will be so worth it. Join groups, you know, through CARD, because other families are going through very similar experiences.
And even for our families who opt to do the Social Security or develop like the DDD route, if you're getting funding, that's a great place to put the money.
Correct.
Like Ashley, you were blessed and you were able to, you know, supplement and fund out of pocket these tests that can be very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you may have to go through Social Security, but Social Security is not only for money. I want this to be known. Like the funding that you get, I I know times are hard, but
Mhm.
using that money for therapy,
It's meant for services.
It's meant
and if
for
you qualify
services.
for SSI, you automatically get Medicaid. So you
Yes,
have access to services.
that is a great place.
Even if it's minimal, let the therapist let you know if 30 minutes once a week is, again, sometimes our hands are tied with what we're able to provide because of insurances.
They are
and
tied.
I've had to say to families, this isn't effective right now because,
it's not enough.
Maybe a week is too long when we start all over with what we, but let the professionals talk to you about what that looks like and what we can and can't do. And then of course, maximize services. If you're eligible for 3 1-hour therapy sessions a week and a child can do that, that's maximize that if you can. Yeah.
You'll be glad you did it on the front end.
Correct.
You will be so glad you did it on the front end.
Correct.
Oh my gosh, this was amazing. Ashley, come back and talk to us about funding options. I love that.
Oh yes.
But
I've been through it because Thomas was on McKay and Gardner. I switched him to Gardner, later in our journey. So this should be like a jump off for you. Like you really should. Her name's Ashley Seiler, guys. She'll be in, she's on this live. If you have questions, DM her. But Ashley, I think that your voice should be heard. I think you need you need something because I think it's just, you have such good information and you come from both sides. You've been on both sides of the table. Yes.
And so I hope that this is a jumping off point, but if not, you've helped so many people who will see this live because it's really good information.
That's what we do. That's what I'm trying to do. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You've been listening to the Let's Talk About Talking podcast with your host, Adrienne Fuller, language and communications expert for kids of all ages. You can grab Adrienne's book, 30 Days to Get Your Toddler Talking, on Amazon or at speechbuilders.org.